there are two things that I've been involved in writing, and it's probably right to say that most of what I've written of much value of the years has been written in collaboration with other people. But there's a paper I did about 7-8 years ago looking at the psychological treatments for schizophrenia. And I think that was quite an important paper, in so much as I think it was important in establishing interventions other than just pharmacological interventions, of course very important in schizophrenia, but said there are other ways, good evidence-based ways, in which we can help people with schizophrenia. I think that systematic review I did some years ago was very helpful in, I think, perhaps the most important paper I've produced. And we've written quite a lot of clinical guidelines for NICE here over the years, and one we did again 5 or 6 years ago on the treatment of depression, I feel very pleased with, again, collaboration with David Goldberg, Tim Kendall and others, but that I think set a framework for the delivery of psychological treatments here in the UK, and it's had quite a bit of influence abroad. So I mean, collaborative work, all of it, but stuff that I think I do feel quite proud about. We've been part of a movement which is very much led by NICE, but part of a movement which has really shifted the way in which people with mental disorders are treated in this country. So for example, I already mentioned the impact I think that the depression guideline had, but we've done quite a lot of work on a range of other anxiety disorders, psychosis, and indeed drug treatments. And I think there are a number of examples there where we have had an important influence on government policy. The development of the Improving Access for Psychological Therapists program really took as its start point the evidence that we collected as part of the development of the NICE guidelines. So I think it's that work where I feel, again, very much a collaborative piece of work that I feel has been perhaps the most successful thing we've done here over the years. But that also brings with it, as you mentioned earlier, some disappointments. And they are sometimes the slow pace of implementation, and to be honest, the struggle sometimes one has with one's colleagues to convince them of the benefits of the scientific evidence, to shift them from their clinical intuition or their long-held beliefs about the value of what they're doing, and getting them to stand back, think about it, and look at what the evidence has to say about what they're doing. And that can be tricky, and at times it does involve some disappointment. The work we've been doing for NICE is very much secondary reviews, but I also have an interest in the evaluation of complex interventions, be they new services developing for first episode psychosis, or as well the treatment of depression. And I think if we just focus on depression for a moment, I think our outcomes, be they pharmacological or psychological, are really not as good as they could be. And so I think there are a number of avenues. I'm pretty convinced really that some of the basic neuroscience that's been done here at UCL and elsewhere is going to provide some really important pointers over the next 5, 10, 15 years about how we shape and modify those treatments to get better outcomes. But I also think smarter design of the studies that we currently do, smarter stats, are going to help us to understand the mediators of change, what actually brings about change in treatment. And for many years it's remained a bit of a black box, but I'd be hopeful and optimistic that in, again, the next 5 to 10 years we begin to get better understanding of what the mechanisms are that underpin change, and that should help us improve treatments. We have a duty to the people that we are involved in treating and supporting to provide the best treatment for them. So I think it's about improving the whole process of the identification of underlying problems, the translation of that into more effective treatments, and then communicating not just to professionals about how treatments might be improved, but also very much involving patients, their families, and the wider public in that debate. So I think not just a more educated professional body, but a more educated public is part of a powerful move for improving outcomes. Specific piece of work that I've been involved here at UCL over the last 2 or 3 years with Tony Roth has been looking at what are the competences of psychological therapists and how might they relate to the outcomes in treatment. How might they, for example, also influence the training that's delivered? And we know that there's very considerable variation between therapists apparently with the same training delivering the same treatment, and actually work on improving the competence, improving the training, the monitoring and supervision of psychological therapists, I think is something that we'll have begun to pay more attention to, and I'd hope would begin also to deliver some real positive outcomes for people.